Stephen, let's stay with our top story of Switzerland and that referendum there. What are the economic consequences likely to be?
Well, the big change, of course, would affect if this law, however the law is going to be construed after this referendum, will be the change for EU nationals going to live in Switzerland. Since 1999, they've had the right to work there. That's what would change under this vote. Now, the EU's Justice Commissioner has reacted to the decision in that referendum, saying that it could affect Switzerland's access to Europe's single market. Of course, Switzerland not a member of the EU, but it does have access to that market. The EU is Switzerland's biggest trading partner. They sell exports worth 90 billion euros every year to the EU. So it's a very important economic partner for them. Now, Viviane Reding told the Financial Times that the EU's 4 fundamental freedoms, that's the movement of people, capital, goods and services, are not separable, and that if the Switzerland wants to reduce one, there may be effects on the other. She said the single market is not a Swiss cheese, and you can't have a single market with holes in it. So there could be more consequences then for those relationships.
Couldn't have said it better. How are things looking on the markets today, Stephen?
It's quite a positive start to the week, actually, in Asia. This after those disappointing job figures out of the US on Friday. New figures from Japan showing the country logged a record low current account surplus. It's a key measure of trade in the country. This is because the value of imports have ballooned, partly due to the weakening value of the yen, but also Japan's huge energy bills in the wake of the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The Chinese shares in Shanghai are up over 2% as well. This, of course, as the markets get back to normal after the New Year holiday.
Now, Stephen, the Eurozone's new banking regulator has said that weak lenders should be allowed to fail.
It's quite a controversial statement from Danielle Nouy, who's the French woman who's taking over as the head of the single supervisory mechanism at the European Central Bank, this Europe's new banking supervisor. In an interview with the Financial Times, she said she wanted to make big banks more careful about their holdings of sovereign debt. This is debt owned by governments, which is bought by banks. It's an effort to break that vicious cycle of banks bringing down a country's economy or vice versa. Now, in that interview, ahead of those bank stress tests due in December, she said that we have to accept that some banks have no future. We have to let them disappear in an orderly fashion and not necessarily try to merge them with other institutions. So quite a strong statement for her, perhaps an indication of things to come.
Very much so. Now, here in France, taxi drivers are staging protests because of what they say is unfair competition. Tell us more.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. It's the second strike held by taxi drivers in the past month. They're unhappy at competition from private hire companies like Uber, which are able to operate with fewer restrictions and lower licence charges here in France. Now, the government had tried to level the playing field by changing the conditions on which services like Uber are able to pick up passengers. That was struck down by the country's Council of State. So now they're back to square one. Delano de Souza has more on this story.
Back blocking the streets, taxis in Paris have called for a strike on Monday over competition from private hire companies. In December, the government had introduced a bid to protect traditional taxis from outside competition. Private companies like internet-based Uber would have had to wait 15 minutes between receiving an order and picking up a client. But according to France's top administrative court, that's not legal. Taxi drivers say they're at a disadvantage because of the high cost of licenses and heavier regulation.
If rules are respected, then everyone has the right to exist. For us to be better in comparison to where we are today, to say we are here, and that we will respond to the needs of our client.
The latest ruling has provided private hire companies with much-needed relief. They say they've done nothing wrong and have only adapted to the needs of the client.
We come from a world of transport, the service of transport. We have evolved to the service of people, and today it's clear taxi drivers are more and more sensitive to this. Things need to be done.
The latest setback has sent the Hollande government back to the drawing board. It will create a panel to examine how best to protect French taxis. Drivers participating in Monday's strike will assemble at Paris's Charles de Gaulle and Orly airports. They are expected to make their way to the centre of Paris, clogging traffic.
Let's take a look now at some of the day's other business stories. And Toyota has said that it's to close its plant in Australia, which will see the end of the country's car manufacturing industry. 2,500 jobs will go as the Japanese firm announced it will halt production due to rising costs. But the move puts at least another 20,000 jobs in the parts industry in jeopardy after General Motors and Ford both announced they were closing their car production plants too. Barclays has begun an investigation into the theft of personal details of 27,000 of its customers. According to the newspaper The Mail on Sunday, the data included information on customers' passports, earnings and even their state of health. The information was stolen and then sold. The bank says it's notified regulators of the inquiry and it'll be working with authorities to find who's responsible. And Boeing says it plans to triple the number of planes flying in Asia in the next 20 years. That would see the aircraft maker with 15,000 planes across the continent, worth $1.9 trillion. The American firm announced its long-term plan at the opening of the Singapore Air Show.
And Stephen, finally, mobile gamers went into mourning this weekend after a well-known bird became extinct. Isn't that so?
This is Flappy Bird. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the smartphone game. Sees players try and guide little bird around various obstacles. You can see some of the footage of it there. It was an online craze, reached the most downloaded app in the App Store last week. Its creator said that it was making more than $50,000 a day in revenue last year, but over the weekend he decided that he was going to pull it from the App Store. He didn't say why. He gave buyers 22 hours notice that he was taking Flappy Birds down for sale. He later clarified the move wasn't for legal reasons and it wasn't for sale, but there's already, don't worry, a Flappy Bird rip-off or remake being sold on the App Store.
Breathe a sigh of relief there then,
Exactly.
Steve. Okay, thanks very much, as ever, for joining us for Business News. Now it's time for web news, and we begin with the protest in Turkey over new internet legislation.
Turkey